Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat datang di Asia Grassroots Forum yang diadakan oleh Amartha. I'll be delivering this session in English, so please feel free though to ask question in Indonesia, in Bahasa, as much as you like. Okay. My name is Julie Fauzi. I'm a Chief Funding Officer of Amartha. And I'm very pleased to sit down here with the three distinguished gentlemen here who's going to accompany me to discuss the opportunities with the $1 billion opportunities in the base of the pyramid. I will introduce our panelists here. On my left hand side is Dirk van Quakebeck. I hope that I spell your name right. He's the managing partner of BNEX, a Singapore-based early-stage venture capital firm investing in India, Southeast Asia, Japan, and the US. He has been living in Asia since 2009 and has been building and investing in early-stage tech company for over 20 years. Prior to BNEX, he co-founded and led the company Builder Apps Ventures, out of which more than a dozen incubation and investment were done, where he had an active operating role in 3 different ventures. He started in his career for 5 years in London banking private equity world. Dirk is close to Amartha, seed investor, so we will hear his experience with Amartha in our session as well. And the gentleman in the middle is Brooke Patterson, Indonesia country lead inclusive financial system of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Brooke has spent more than a decade supporting the development of inclusive digital financial services. Following 2 years in Kenya, he has spent the last decade focused on inclusive finance in Southeast Asia. Currently, he is the Indonesia country lead for the Inclusive Financial System team at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where he managed the team financial inclusion grant portfolio in Indonesia. The foundation goal is to support the government and private sector to develop the financial infrastructure, policy, and products that make the emerging digital economy more inclusive and more empowering for women and low-income communities. Brooke will explain probably more in detail. And then the last but not least is Bernhard Eichenberg as the head of emerging market strategy of Community Investment Management. Served as a partner and co-founded the firm Emerging Market Strategy, where he focuses on investment and operation activities and is based out of Indonesia. Prior to that, Bernhard also spent a decade in various roles at BCP, including a fund manager for Bamboo Fintech Equity Fund, head of financial inclusion, and regional director for LATAM. So thank you for coming on this stage. It's very nice meeting you. Before we explore further on the topic, I probably would like to request you to share some of the materials that you have prepared to give probably general context to the audience before we dive into more of the subject. I'll probably start with Brooke, if you may. Oh, that's you. Okay, that's okay. So I think we just turn the... Okay, sure. So I guess I'm going to welcome Dirk to present first.
Yeah, is this actually projected or no? Maybe you can project it on the back because most of it is anyway pictures. So nice to meet you all. Terima kasih for having us. Really excited to be here. We have been an early believer in Amartha. We were actually #1 investor together with our very good friend Rio Sullivan, and have seen the journey of Amartha from the get-go. When we started BNEX in 2015, we really started it to be a partnership of the founders, for the founders, by the founders. We are all ex-founders who had gone through the ups and downs of building a company, and we wanted to build a community for like-minded individuals to essentially change the surface in Southeast Asia and India through technology. Do I give you a signal like this or something to go to the next slide? You have it. Okay, can I have it? Okay. So those are just some impressions. Once a year, we bring everybody together. We celebrate entrepreneurship. So similarly to what Amartha really does, but you do it at the grassroots, at the bottom of the pyramid level. We bring people together who believe they can change the world, and we surround them by like-minded individuals. We give them capital, we give them confidence, we give them guidance. The difference is that usually they come from better educated households. They were earlier included and educated and had a better chance in life. But it's very similar to the DNA. So what Amartha has accomplished is really close to my heart. This was 2014, the first what we call B Camp. And we grew every year exponentially. 42 companies, 32 companies added, 35 companies added, 29 companies. And we do these camps every time in a market where we actively invest in. This is the last B Camp we did in Bali, actually in Indonesia. In Indonesia, we have been investing since 2000, I think, 10. So my business partner, Teru Satu, also the founder of the firm, invested in Tokopedia and was one of the first investors in Tokopedia and helped the company scale. And in total, we have invested by now in 320 companies, so the slide is a little bit outdated. They very often start at the bottom. So they are maybe 2, 3 people in a garage with a dream, or in a warung, and they want to change the world. And then they come to this community and they realize maybe a Tokopedia, a Gojek also started with 2 people in a garage. And we try to inspire and transpire and cross-pollinate throughout this community. And it's probably the greatest achievement we have accomplished. I think it's very similar for Amartha. It's really about the borrowers, it's what they are doing with the capital that Amartha is providing them. So by now we have 10 unicorns in the portfolio. We have over 320 companies split across India, Southeast Asia, Japan, and India. We have around 120 investments. We usually invest $500 to $2 million and then help these companies scale. In Southeast Asia, we have an additional 80 companies, and the rest is in Japan and rest of the world. On the financial services side, I mean, this gives just a snapshot on things. It's different areas from traditional digital banking and accounting and maybe lending. But if we really go back to the beginning, so around the time that we invested in Indonesia, in Amartha, everybody was chasing lending. And it was largely unsecured because the majority of the population just didn't have a digital footprint or access to a credit score or hasn't been formally financially included. So one of the investments that we did very early on was a company called Trusting Social, which leverages telco data, but also other data on a consent basis to basically credit score individuals and facilitate access to financial products. And that was the base for us. By now, they're in a position to scale. I'm proud to say they're in a position to actually score over 2 billion people. So they have technically scored over 2 billion people through telco collaborations, predominantly in Southeast Asia and India. Subsequently, we did a lot in lending. We did a lot of record keeping, so accounting, etc. Then open banking came along and other embedded financial services came along. So we have invested really for the last 15 years in various financial service sectors in India and Southeast Asia. I'm not alone here. I think there are two, 3 colleagues here as well. So if you are building a company and you want to talk to us, do reach out. And I think that's it. So thank you for having us.
Thank you, Dirk. Next, maybe, depending on this, maybe I can request Brooke to share some slides. Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you, Ibu. It's an honor to be on the stage today with the panelists and with all of you. As I was introduced, my name is Brooke Patterson. I'm with the Inclusive Financial Systems team of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. For those of you who don't know, the Gates Foundation is the largest family foundation in the world. Some of these numbers are out of date now. We're about 2,000 people globally, and we operate 40 different program areas where we invest in health solutions, agriculture, education, and of course financial services, which is where I work. Most of us, like me, are based in Seattle, but we also have offices in various parts of the globe, as you can see here on the map. I won't go through all of them. But then when we think about areas of focus for my team on the Inclusive Financial Systems side, we focus most deeply in 9 countries. In Africa, we have Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Ethiopia, and East Africa, Nigeria, and West Africa, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India and South Asia, and then alone in Southeast Asia is Indonesia. And so I lead our work in Indonesia, really thinking about how we can support greater access to financial services amongst low-income populations and women, and how those services can be used in a way that has impact in lives and livelihoods. So what are our objectives for the Inclusive Financial Systems team? Is really to think about, yes, how do we get people into financial services? But of course, having access to financial services is not the end goal. It is really to think about how those financial services can bring benefit to people's lives, and whether that's resilience, so surviving economic shocks, a death in the family, a health shock, a weather event if you're in agriculture. Also, we're increasingly thinking about the gender aspects of how we work and how our partners work. So thinking about how do we make sure that women are included in the economy, how women have access to financial services, and how they bring benefit to their lives and livelihoods. All with the goal of generating economy-wide efficiencies, which mean increasing people's access to economic opportunity, with the goal of helping people to climb out of poverty, right? So we focus on those who are in poverty now, who are low income, but the goal is to provide them the financial tools that can help them get out of poverty over time. And I think it's important to emphasize here that when I talk about we as the Gates Foundation, that behind the foundation really is a number of partners. And so we are a grant-making organization, we are a funding organization. And so we work with grantees who actually are engaging in the countries of focus. And so in Indonesia, we have about a dozen different grantees, some of whom are here today. I know that Women's World Banking is represented, as well as some others, who work closely with the government and private sector to help us achieve some of these objectives. So when we talk about our approach to this work, we're focused in 3 broad areas. One is on the policy and regulatory side. So really thinking about how do we support policymakers and regulators to create the policy context for inclusion and innovation. And so this can be everything from, as you see in Indonesia, like the Laku Pandai regulations. We weren't involved in those, but those are a great example of policies and programs that help drive financial inclusion. We also think about KYC, how do people get into accounts, and really lowering the barriers for KYC. And increasingly, now that we're seeing greater uptake of financial services, is really thinking about the consumer protection side. So how do we work with regulators to support market conduct supervision? How do we make sure there's less fraud and abuse? So as more people come into the financial system, so does some of the risks they might experience. And how do we make sure that those risks are minimized? We also think about financial infrastructure. And so of course, when we talk about infrastructure, this is not ports and roads, but this is the technology that underpins the financial system. And so in Indonesia, this is the National Payments Gateway, or BI Fast. These are solutions that we are not involved in here in Indonesia, but in other markets, we're heavily invested in supporting the development of real-time payments infrastructure across multiple markets. And then ID infrastructure, which is a really key enabler. I just mentioned KYC. Being able to identify people quickly and cheaply is a key element of reducing the cost to serve and the ease to onboard customers, and making sure that people actually have access to financial services. So we think quite a bit about ID, and through our partnership with the World Bank, are working very closely with Dukcapil and others here in Indonesia to modernize the payments or the ID system. And then once we have these components in place, how do we actually get people into account? And so we think about how do we actually get people participating in digital financial services. And so we think about this from both sort of a push side and a pull side. And so when I talk about push, it's thinking about what are the programs and products that actually sort of push people into accounts. One of the main levers that we think about is social payments, so bansos payments in Indonesia. This could be PKH, this could be Sembako, for example. And thinking about how you digitize those products and services to make sure that people have who would be receiving payments in cash are actually instead receiving those into a formal account, whether that's a bank account, an e-wallet, or some other form of regulated financial account. We also are starting to think about wage digitization. So in Indonesia, most factory workers, for example, large employers that employ low-income populations are already paying into digital accounts. All government officers are mostly paid into digital accounts already. But thinking about how do we then bring the informal economy, which represent the majority of the labor force, to increasingly be paid, have their wages paid digitally. And so that's on the push side. On the pull side is really thinking about product innovations. And so firms like Amartha, firms like Coinworks, who are represented here, thinking about how do you innovate on the product side that pull people into accounts by giving them products and services that they need in their daily lives or in their livelihoods that deliver value that pulls them into the financial system. And so what does this mean in Indonesia specifically? And so many of the objectives that I've shared flow through to the work in Indonesia. And so our global strategy translates very much to how we think about grant making in Indonesia. Though some of our specific goals may be a little bit different. So certainly we're increasingly focused on how we engage rural women, particularly rural women entrepreneurs, in the financial services ecosystem. And so this is payments products and credit products. We do not do much work in insurance, but then hopefully down the road we'll be thinking about that, and it's part of the bundled package as well. And increasingly thinking about the livelihood side. And so historically we've been very focused on payments by consumers and individuals, and increasingly thinking about how do we actually benefit firms. In Indonesia, of course, most people are either employed by small firms or are small entrepreneurs themselves. And so this link to livelihoods and firm welfare is really important. And so in terms of our long-term goals, by 2024, we would love to see, 2028, we would love to see 75% of Indonesian adults owning their own account. This is per the World Bank Findex, which is different than OJK's numbers, which are collected in a different way. We also want people using these accounts actively, and importantly, we want them to trust these accounts. And so increasingly we've seen trust, or lack of trust, being a big barrier to the uptake of financial services. So how do you ensure trust in the financial system? Some of this is the literacy and capability side, which we already heard a lot of people talk about today. But we're really focused on how do we think about the market conduct side and the fraud prevention and detection side to make sure that people don't suffer harms in the first place, or if harm does happen, that they have appropriate and trusted and efficient redress mechanisms to address those frauds or errors when they occur. And so overall, we're really thinking about sort of the broad sweep of the different elements that drive innovation in an ecosystem to help bring people into the digital financial services marketplace. So with that, I'll stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, bro. Our next panelist, Bernhard.
Selamat sore, senang sekali hadir hari ini di sini. Terima kasih atas undangannya. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bernhard Eichenberg, and I'm a partner at Community Investment Management. Thank you to the hosts for organizing this splendid event and for starting this important dialogue. So I also realize we're the last thing between you and the party and cocktails, so we'll try and keep it interesting. Community Investment Management is an impact investor that helps financial technology platforms to scale innovations and lending. So we're a credit investor offering credit to fintechs worldwide, both in the United States and in emerging markets, and we help them grow their lending or payments books. So we only work with fintechs that that either work with businesses, MSME businesses, or with individuals, and whose product promote to financial inclusion. We've done that for the last 11 years, started off in the United States, and then launched an emerging market strategy about 3 years ago. So I think, we've been hearing this already quite a bit today, and a lot of this is going to be old news to you, but we really believe that financial technology can serve to foster innovation in emerging markets and base of pyramid populations and promote another vehicle towards financial inclusion. Obviously, the finance sector has already done, has done its part to a degree, and microfinance companies have already started to attend an important part of the base of pyramid populations, but fintech has a unique way of attending certain segments and niches that have been so far still unattended or undertended. For example, education finance or supply chain finance. So we think there's a lot that fintech can still do to provide more customized products to markets that have so far been poorly attended to date. Also, what we're seeing is that emerging markets are leapfrogging a lot of the trends that we're seeing in more developed countries. So we're seeing regulatory approaches that are more proactive, that are creating specific figures to promoting financial inclusion, and that just makes for an ideal environment right now to further drive that agenda of financial inclusion. And lastly, I would say also one of the other factors that that has been strong has been there's a lot of venture activity, investment activity, international investment activity coming into these sectors, and that has helped investors like ourselves to de-risk some of those models. And I think worldwide right now, I think there's about 100 countries that have active venture capital ecosystems. So there's definitely a globalization and a dynamic development of these ecosystems. So I think we all know the story. The vast majority of population in the world is going to be living in emerging markets in the future. Most of them are going to be very, very young, and let's face it, most of them still don't have access to the right set of services. And when we talk about finance, so there's still a long way to go. And the way we look at this is that we sort of think about technology being able to drive innovation for clusters and how that can help to bring base of pyramid or low-income and middle-income populations into a more inclusive financial system. The first one is around cost efficiencies. So that's pretty obvious how technology can basically help you cut costs, mostly around infrastructure and branches and things like that. The second one is around customer channels, how we interact, how financial institutions can interact in the future with customers, be it mobile wallet or similar tools like that. The third one is obviously data. There's vast swaths of data that have been generated in the past decades, and increasingly since COVID, we're seeing the digitization of commerce and society advancing at such a fast pace that all these new data sets that are coming online are allowing for a much more customized and a richer information set that allows us to attend customers that previously weren't be able to be attended. And the fourth point is around how new technologies is also allowing us to access new types of pools of collaterals, unlocking type assets that were previously not unlocked, and that allowed fintechs to lend against. So in short, we're really excited and optimistic about those innovations and how that can drive business in countries like Indonesia. With regard to how to manage and handle the impact, social impact versus also the financial considerations in our investment thesis, we think around impact on three levels really. The first one is on the system-wide level, and similar to what my esteemed colleague Brooke here was talking about, engaging with governments. I mean, we're not a foundation, so we obviously have different ways of engaging, but we've tried to be part of the debate on a national level in different countries in order to promote responsible lending. We've been a co-author of the Small Business Borrowers Bill of Rights, for example, in the United States, and try and engage with the industry bodies and governments wherever we go in order to push that agenda. The second one is obviously with our partners that we work with, the financial technology companies, and how we can help them scale responsible innovations in lending. And then the third one, which is ultimately the most important one, is looking through the value chain and seeing how how this all ends up working out for the end users, for the customers, for the borrowers, and for the businesses that we fund. And maybe as a last point, I wanted to make is that we talk, today we've been talking a lot about the base of pyramid populations, and I want to say maybe I look at this slightly different. So when we talk about base of pyramid, we often talk about a pyramid, meaning that the focus of impact investing and of these new technologies emerging should be at the lower end of the income pyramid. But from my experience and what I've seen in the last decades, very often this actually looks more like a diamond, meaning that the bulk of the opportunities for impact investing, for commercial and responsible business models to sort of come in and work in these markets is more around the lower middle income or upper lower income segments of the population rather than the base of pyramid populations per se, given that they often have a very different need and come from a different level and require different types of interventions that don't necessarily lend themselves always to pure commercial or more commercially oriented investing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I actually have a list of questions in my head right now, listening to this presentation. But let me start with the first question for all three of you. We're talking about the base of pyramids. We're talking about opportunities. You invest a lot, not only in Indonesia, but also in other countries, right? So how do you see the Indonesian market compare to other Southeast Asian countries, for example, in terms of the value of these opportunities in the base of pyramid? Now, Indonesia has huge population, half of it probably unbanked, huge opportunities, but also a lot of challenges. So probably, you can share with the audience, how do you see the market in Indonesia compared to the other countries? Probably would like to start with Dirk, if you may.
So as mentioned, we invest a lot in India as well. And if you know anything about India, it's a very exciting fintech market. And a lot of that is due to maybe two things that really played out the India fintech stack, as they call it. So there's something called digital public good infrastructure in India, which essentially started with a biometric citizen database that allows each and every one here in this room through 13 data points to identify yourself uniquely to enter a digital transaction. Whether you can read or write, doesn't matter, you can identify yourself. So if you want to enter a contract, then that was followed by additional tools like eKYC, using these data points and e-signature, which is mandated by government. And the government introduced this and forced it on the citizen, and it managed to include what they call Aadhaar database, 1.2 billion people over a period of 10 years. Second thing then, which is a key piece now of this India stack, is UPI, Unified Payment Interface Layer. So when the government thought about how can we tackle financial inclusion, they said we have to be able to identify somebody who is not in the room uniquely. So if a farmer somewhere in an island in Indonesia wants to enter into a financial contract with a bank in Jakarta, it should be possible. So orienting yourself at the weakest link, if you will. And then they said, well, there's a lot of what I call transaction noise in the existing traditional ecosystem. So if you're a weak link, and weak here means, you may not earn the same amount that somebody who works in the city earns, you shouldn't be penalized for having a minimal deposit base. You shouldn't be penalized on every transaction, no matter how small it is. But that is status quo in Indonesia. That is no longer status quo in India. So you have real-time payment networks, that allow you to transfer P2P free of charge. You're not being penalized if your minimum deposit goes to whatever, a few rupees. And that's huge from an adoption point of view for that segment, right? And I consider what they have achieved slowly but surely becoming a huge export good at government and bilateral conversation. And I think it will become table stakes. So when I think about investing, let's say in India, these table stakes are there. So you invest in innovation that leverages these table stakes. Here sometimes we still have to think a little bit more foundational and Amartha itself has to think and tackle these problems one by one. These problems on a horizontal level obviously also pose a great investment opportunity. So solving KYC, solving e-signatures, solving biometric identity at citizen scale is a phenomenal opportunity. What we have seen though globally is that the adoption is hard to push at really when it's really these base pieces of the pyramid. So I think that's it, and then there's a lot of very obvious things around like geographic diversity, etc., language diversity, but I think that is something maybe unique these days, whether you have a stack or piece of the stack in a country, and Pakistan has it now, Bangladesh is introducing it, so it's really going around the world. Indonesia tried, but unfortunately there were some unfortunate events on the eKYC company, as far as I know, yeah.
Thank you, Dirk. I think, yeah, I truly related to that. I mean, the simple KYC, probably simple to those lives in the city, but not so simple for those who live outside the cities, in the rural. And, you know, if there's in India, they can crack that and, you know, and implement that in Indonesia, that will be very helpful for everybody. Yeah, thank you. Next, probably Brooke, you know, how do you see Indonesia as compared to other countries in terms of opportunities in the base of pyramid?
Yes, thank you. You know, obviously when we talk about investment from the Gates Foundation standpoint, it's very different, right? We're talking about making grants, not investing in companies, and so we come at it from a very different perspective than Dirk or Bernard might, though we have similar and shared goals around impact. So when I look at Indonesia, I mean, I think I would simply say, yes, I totally agree with Dirk, and so I don't need to repeat what he said, but I think it is important to emphasize that the points he's made around sort of that foundational infrastructure, foundational DPIs is really critical to a country's development. So when you look at Indonesia, those pieces are not yet in place, but they're getting close to being in place. And so I am very optimistic about where Indonesia will be in 5 years' time when the real-time payments infrastructure is there, the fully digital ID system is there, and then increasingly as we start to think about open banking models, BI is already pushing that. We're going to see OJK hopefully come in shortly as well. There is going to be tremendous opportunity to drive innovation and particularly drive down the cost of innovation that brings more people into the economic frame. And I think when we talk about the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid, and I think that book was published maybe nearly 20 years ago already, which sort of inspires, right, the theme of this session. We are still talking about it today, right? We are talking about it because it's extremely hard to do. And so as we think about how do you actually reach the lowest income segments, the most remote communities, you need to think about how do you drive down that cost side of reaching and serving, onboarding and servicing those consumers. And of course, we've talked a lot today and across the various panels, and Bernard has talked about the value of technology there, which I think is super important, but also need to think about the revenue side. Is how do you actually realize returns from people who are inherently low income, who may have lower engagement with businesses. And so I think these challenges are profound across the markets in which the foundation focuses, which is why we do choose those markets to focus on. However, I think Indonesia presents some unique opportunities, and so I'm very optimistic relative to some of our other markets about the near-term potential. Right? And so I met with a woman today who was talking about investing in seaweed production, right? And Indonesia is uniquely positioned, whether it's seaweed or aquaculture or other areas, to leverage the tremendous resources that it has to engage small independent firms, farmers in this case, and linking them to both the local and global supply chains. And so I think Indonesia does have a lot of potential here to reach the bottom of the pyramid, lower income segments, rural segments, in productive ways. There still might be some subsidy required, which Bernard alluded to reach those who are hardest to reach, and that's where I think some of the goals around social assistance that Pak Jokowi has pushed, that the incoming president is also advocating, I think are really important to thinking about some of those business models. But then also, how do you balance state-owned or state-led solutions with the need for innovation? So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks. Yeah, I also fully concur with the points made by Brooke and Dirk here, and I don't have too much to add, but I would just say, the necessity drives innovation, and the situation, the geography, topography of Indonesia, the archipelago, just makes for an environment for a lot of clusters of innovation to come out. And so I think that's definitely what we're seeing, that we're seeing a lot of innovation in Indonesia. I would say also, we're seeing, to Dirk's point earlier around the country stacks and how that's become table stake, I almost want to say we're seeing a competitive, or maybe it's wishful thinking, but I feel like we're seeing the beginnings of a competitive race to the top rather than a race to the bottom, meaning that countries are competing with each other and trying to become a more attractive investment place. And definitely get the sense that the other countries in ASEAN, the neighboring countries, are looking up at Indonesia to take a leadership role. There's a lot of wait and see also going on there, and Indonesia is definitely expected to be the leader given its natural characteristics for that. Maybe one last point, and that's also due to the size and scale of Indonesia as a country and its population, is the rise or the consolidation of these super apps and large platforms, right? I mean, similar to what we've seen in China and Indonesia, you have very, very strong, all-encompassing platforms that comprise, as we all know, anything from finance to logistics to mobility and a bunch of other themes. And combining all of these together on the platform creates the obvious network effects, right, and multiplier effects. And so I think we're likely to see in Indonesia, even more so in some of the smaller neighbors, business models that try to participate in that value chain.
Thank you. I guess we have a lot of catch up to do. Okay, so the next question, I was interested in probably Brooke, you're sharing about the three words that come to my mind is what you said about digital, women, and low income. Why is it these three words? Why is it so special? What is the opportunity in these three simple words: digitally connected, women, and low income?
So, I mean, I think I don't want to repeat some of what's already been said as we talk about technology, but I think keeping in mind what has already been said and then adding to that. So, digital, women, and low income, and so how do the three fit together? I think I already spoke to sort of the cost side, right? And so as we talk about reaching those who have historically been excluded, you have to think about ways to reach people at a lower cost because they have not been served very well by traditional models. And so the belief is, and our belief is that the key to that lay in technology. And so obviously we're all very familiar with the tremendous reach of mobile phones, mobile telephony, where you can be most anywhere and have access to technology at very low cost relative to traditional models. And so this is a way to reach people, but also as a way to then serve people and bring them in. And so I think these tools are essential, but of course, not by themselves sufficient as we think about how to actually reach people. Yes, we want to leverage technology, and that can be both through DPIs, both through service level and product level innovation. It can really drive down the cost of acquiring and serving customers. But we really do need to continue to have the human touch. And so Amartha is actually a great example of how these things come together, right? And they have a very deep field team, but also are investing heavily in technology side, which can make your business more successful, more inclusive than it has been traditionally. And so as we think about it from the foundation side, it is getting the pieces in place, the foundation. So we're talking, DPIs we've already talked about. It's then thinking about the product innovation side on the technology side. And then it's thinking about the human systems in which you actually have to apply these technologies. And so how do we engage communities in a real way? And I think even, maybe at some point down the road, people will self-onboard and be able to self-serve. But we haven't gotten there yet. And so it's thinking about how do you actually pair technology with on-the-ground support. And so, I think, we should give, tons of credit to banks like BRI, right? With their BRILink agents. They have 600,000 agents out there. That business line is profitable and expanding, right? And so it is a mix of that digital and human network that reaches rural areas. And so it's bringing the things together to extend the reach of financial services, which is incredibly powerful, and creates then a foundation for further innovation, which I think there's still a lot more we can do there.
Thank you. So we're supposed to be on Q&A session, but probably one question for Dirk. The microfinance has significantly empowered base of pyramid, and it's what Amartha do. But after this, what's beyond? What's beyond microfinance? What's in terms of other innovative financial models that can further, expand this financial inclusion and improve the quality of the life of this base of pyramids?
Yeah, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Let me try my best with a little story. So we started Pnex around 10 years ago. And one of my first investments in the Philippines was a company called Coins.ph. And Coins.ph was started by a gentleman called Ron Hose, Israeli-American, who moved to the Philippines, fell in love with the country. And what he was trying to solve for, if you know or visited the Philippines ever, you have a large population actually living outside of the Philippines, working outside, and sending money back. And if you know anything about our part of the world, FX is suboptimal. Foreign exchange is suboptimal, especially if you send foreign exchange from, let's say, in Indonesia to a Philippines. So call it a non-US dollar euro transaction, because you have to jump via USD and you pay a lot of fees. And he tried to tackle this 10 years ago with crypto, so Bitcoin. He was settling in Bitcoin real time, and he would consolidate payments from all over the world into Filipino peso and convert it locally and bring it back. It was growing very rapidly. And I asked him, what is your biggest challenge for further adoption? And he said, simple math. So my end customer does not understand that they just saved 3% on a transaction, because it's simple math. And I think unfortunately, for some of our customers in Amartha, that may also hold true. But I think there's hope, because if you have not been living under a rock for the last 12 months, I think education should be a key pillar and a digital companion on financial inclusion for an SME owner, for a mother, for a business owner, to make savvy decisions and build trust. Because a lot of what we try to do, I think, at that level, whether it's digital transformation or whatever, is actually building trust. Using financial products for the first time is building trust. So having something in your pocket that you can actually ask questions about the simple math, the simple investment idea. We all know the pillars of, there's wealth, there's lending, there's insurance, and then if you add income, then you're technically financially included. But I think a piece missing that really should be freely accessible for anybody interested in financial services should be an AI companion on financial services. So I think that's one example that could make a difference. And I'm sure there are many, many more.
Thank you, Dirk. So I think we have to open the Q&A session. Any question from the audience? Okay. To Brooke. This is a question for you, I think.
For Brooke.
Oh.
Let me read it out. Microfinance has played a significant role in empowering bottom-of-the-pyramid communities. What other innovative financial models can be explored to further expand financial inclusion and economic opportunities for these populations?
So from the foundation point of view, this question is actually backwards in terms of how we've approached financial inclusion for over a decade now, where from how we came at it, microfinance was not where we wanted to start. We actually wanted to start with payments. And so we've talked a bit on this panel already about remittance. We really saw that in countries like Kenya in particular, and then others that followed closely after, it was domestic remittance. It was person payments that were the hook, that was the anchor product that got people into financial services in the first place. That created that need and that demand, the pull that I was talking about earlier. And so we still feel that that is true, that is the essential starting point from financial services, that if people do not have access to basic payments, a basic transaction account, whether that's to hold a store of value for safekeeping, or to be able to transfer funds to a friend or a family member to pay school fees, to pay utility bills, to buy goods at the store, that is the thing that you need to get right first. And then you can start to layer on other products. And so that includes microfinance and includes other types of credit products, because they have a familiarity with the digital financial ecosystem already. But then also, as we've talked about data, you have now created a data trail that can be used to support lower cost underwriting to improve access to financial services. And so as we think about sort of financial models, is really payment. And whether you consider payments innovative or not, I guess depends on your point of view, but certainly there are innovations on the payment side that we believe are really important. And so a lot of our thinking starts there and then expands out to credit and other financial products.
Thank you. Any other question? Oh. I guess it's too dark. Okay, let me read that for you.
I would love to invite Taufan on stage.
Okay.
No, I'm joking, but we're an early investor in Amartha. So Taufan benefited, I hope, a little bit from our help. I think one is, so I've been asking, maybe I can tell this story. I've been asking Taufan for a few years if I could now graduate from the board of directors. So far, he has not allowed me to graduate, which may mean that we add some value. So there's obviously a partner contact in the firm who works with you, trying to figure out how to scale your business. And in the early days, it may be really about product market fit, go-to-market fit, what's your ICP, how do you scale the unit, or how do you get control on the P&L and the unit economics, all these things, before you actually press the gas, right, and you start scaling. I always say one of my biggest responsibility is always trying to be a counterbalance to the founders. When they're too excited, I should be a little bit more mellow. When they're less excited, I should be really the cheerleader. And I think the easiest way to kill a business in the early infancy is to scale prematurely. So when certain things are not there, the best example is unit economics. You're scaling unprofitable unit economics to show your investors that you can build a large business. It's the easiest way to die. And you have to read that as an investor and smell that. Are we on the right path? Do we really have a product market fit? And are we ready to scale? So that's sort of on an individual basis. Then I shared with you the community, and we really pride ourselves that this community cross-collaborates and cross-pollinates a lot. So we have over 100 fintech companies where founders are talking on a daily basis, asking for help for each other, business model ideas, sparring, etc. We also have various vertical functions. So we have like a community manager, we have HR help, we have fundraising help. So all those things. And then money is the easy, not the easy, I mean, sorry, it's still hard to raise money, but money has color. And money can be smart, or meaning value add or not value add. And we try to be the value add capital along your journey.
Thank you, Dirk. I got a signal from the team that we ran out of time. So before we close the session, I think I would like to probably, if you can say one or two words on the key measures on the opportunities in the grassroots market to the audience before we close the session. I would like to have Bernhard as a first turn. You can't hear me. Okay, sorry. For a closing, probably you can say one or two words. What's the key takeout or the key messages in terms of opportunities in the, in the base of the pyramids?
Thanks. And sorry about the acoustic. It's a little hard to hear.
Sorry, brother.
Yeah, no, I think I would like to reiterate the point that I made earlier, that it's obviously a massive opportunity, but we have to be responsible in how we serve those customers and how we go about it. Responsible ultimately means being responsible for our well-being for all of us, for all the stakeholders, and it has to be accretive. It cannot be that my profit is your loss, basically, right? So as a starting point, we have to think about how we can invest and provide services in a commercially viable way that ultimately end up improving the life of the end users. That really, to us, is key about doing business in countries like Indonesia and with these type of populations. And I think, Amartha has shown everyone in here how this can be done successfully, and at the same time, how it can be scaled and in a very challenging environment. So, I want to congratulate Amartha for what it's done, and we're looking for similar business models that push the frontier in terms of serving customers that have either not been attended well or sufficiently or not attended at all, who have pain points, and where innovations can contribute to doing this in a responsible way, and hopefully we can contribute to scaling that.
Thank you. Brooke?
Yes, thank you. So, as I said earlier, scaling to the bottom of the pyramid is hard. Right? We would not all be here today, and Amartha would not be here today if it were easily done. And so obviously it takes quite a bit of work, but one of the reasons we talk about the opportunity at the bottom of the pyramid is because there is quite noticeably commerce in every community, right? There is an economy there, right? And so I think as we think about, we're talking about innovative models, we're talking about technology, we shouldn't only think about new solutions, but also think about existing services that do work, right? And so a lot of the communities have been able to develop essentially bespoke products that serve the needs of individual community members that are served in a very on-the-ground way. And so, you think about loan sharks, right? Informal lenders, which have a bad name, and some of it deservedly so. But one of the reasons they've been so successful is because they're able to serve the people in their community with a product that they need at the time they need, with the terms that they need, right? And that flexibility, that design agility, if you will, in these traditional service models are very hard to match, but need to be so that we can actually drive down the cost. And so, and Dirk referred to the cost, how it's very expensive to be poor because the cost of your services are so much higher than if you're middle class or upper class. And so thinking about how do we bring these traditional service models with technology together to create that opportunity while bringing impact.
Last but not least, Dirk.
Let me keep it very, very brief. I like this investor called Charlie Munger. And if you have never read any of his book, I recommend the adalah, which is a composition of basically his most famous speeches. And the payment gateway Stripe, actually, he passed away recently, almost touching 100 years. And the payment gateway Stripe actually has a press. So they released a new book of his, the adalah edition number 10. They added one more chapter. And on the back of the book, it has a quote, which I really like, which also applies to business and applies to what we're trying to do here. Take a simple idea and take that very seriously. So I'll end on that. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for our panelists. Very inspiring. I hope the audience also as inspired as me. So thank you so much. And by this, we close our session. Thank you.